All right, are we started here? We are recording and we are live and we have begun. Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm Ocean Robbins, thrilled to be here welcoming all of you to this event with us. What a beautiful opportunity to be here in this moment with everybody who is gathering from over the world for the art of peace. How to dial down your stress on the inside, no matter what is happening on the outside. I'm Ocean Robbins, co-founder and CEO of Food Revolution Network. And I want to acknowledge that in the US, we've just come through a big election. And I know a lot of folks are feeling a whole range of emotions right now. Some people are heartbroken, even terrified. Others are feeling hopeful or even elated. All of us are feeling impacts of a society and even of families that have become in many ways divided. Some of you are here navigating personal or family health crises. You might be in pain. You might have loved ones who are in pain. And all of us live in a world with vast problems, from war and violence to air and water pollution to climate chaos. So there's no shortage of suffering or pain in the human experience. Yet we also live in a world with profound beauty. We're part of a species that's capable of healing and regeneration and wisdom and great love. So wherever you are in this moment and whatever you're feeling in this moment, I want to welcome you and I want to say this is a space for you. Our goal today is to offer you some tools for finding peace and resilience no matter what goes on in the world around you, to help you cultivate a place of witness and presence and calm that can support you in navigating the inevitable storms of life with more ease and more grace. And you know, the four pillars of lifestyle medicine are eat better, stress less, love more, and move more. And at Food Revolution Network, we focus a lot on the eat better part of that, which makes sense since we're Food Revolution Network. But, you know, stress less is also a big part of it, and so is love more. And we're going to focus on both of those here today. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by a very special guest, Jack Kornfield. Jack has dedicated his life to the practice of mindfulness and compassion. He trained as a Buddhist monk in Thailand, India, and Burma. He holds a Ph.D. in clinical psychology. He is a founding teacher of both the Insight Meditation Society and Spirit Rock Meditation Center, and he's been a guiding light in bringing mindfulness practice to the West since 1984. He's also an activist, a husband, a grandfather, and the author of 16 books that have sold over 2 million copies. His work has touched the lives of millions, and I know his wisdom will touch all of us today. Welcome, Jack.
Thank you, Ocean. Very happy to see you, to be here, and to be with all the others. Will they appear on the screen or is it
We
just?
won't get, this is a webinar structure in Zoom, so we won't get to see everybody in Zoom, but we will
Okay,
have space where we'll be taking questions from people along the way. So just so folks
great.
know a little bit of the
Good, good.
structure here, I want to invite all of you watching to participate fully. You will get more out of this if you're not multitasking. So encourage you to put devices away, bring yourself fully present to this moment, recognizing that this moment could be a defining moment in your life journey. Who knows? Let's all show up here. And feel free to leave comments in the chat box. And if you have a question for Jack or for me, please post it in the Q&A box. We'll do our best to take some time later on to address some questions. And we also encourage you again to just take a deep breath right now and allow yourself to settle into this moment. Jack will be leading us in a short practice later, and I'll also have the privilege of interviewing him in a moment. So we'll do a little interview, a little practice, and then take some questions from our community here today. Thank you again for being here. Jack, just to start things off, can you tell us a little bit about what led you on the path to mindfulness as a life work?
Suffering.
Suffering, yeah.
Which we all have. It's
Yeah,
part of life. It's not, I mean, life, as you said, is magnificently beautiful, and that's also an ocean of tears, to borrow your name for a moment. It's got
yeah,
both.
yeah.
And I was in in university studying pre-med, and I went from an organic chemistry class to hear this professor who'd come up to Dartmouth from Harvard, Dr. Wing-Sit Chan, and he talked about Lao Tzu and Confucius and the Buddha. Sat cross-legged on the desk, and he said, he said the Buddha taught that there's suffering in life and that there's a path to the end of it. And he paused, and I kind of leaned forward. I said, oh, I'd had my father was a abusive and very violent person. So our family had a lot of suffering, and it was pretty unstable in other ways. And I realized that I needed to learn something more than chemistry or mathematics, that I didn't know how to deal with my grief or my emotions or my fear or my own anger. And so I began a path of trying to understand that, which led me to become a monk in a Buddhist monastery.
Suffering is, rightly or wrongly, it seems to be one of the ways we humans learn so often. And I'm curious, the question has burned in my heart for so long, like, why would God make pain? Like, if creator can create anything, why is there suffering in the world? Why is there pain in the world? Why is there loss and devastation? What is the purpose of it? Like, I know that's a big question, and we all have our different religions and cosmologies and ways of holding that, but you've gone pretty deep with the purpose and the meaning of life. So I'm curious if you have an answer to that.
Well, I'll say something. I'm not going to offer an answer that would be foolish, and I'm quite foolish, but that would be extravagantly so. But you can't have birth without death. You can't have light without dark. You can't have beginnings without endings. We live in a universe, in a constructed of opposites. And that's just the game of form and duality. You can't have form without emptiness from which it comes. I remember a friend of mine was leading a retreat for children. She was a meditation teacher, but also preschool teacher. And she had 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds. She said, I want to talk about death. And kids are really interested in this. They're not frightened. They kind of want to understand, what is the game? What are we here? They're looking around saying, wow, I got born. What is this like, this place? And so she said, things that are born, they also die. They live for a time. Why don't you go out in the woods where they were and bring back whatever you can that you find that's died? So they ran out and they brought back dead leaves and sticks, and somebody found like a dead lizard or a bone from a mouse or a bird, and they made a pile so that they could actually look at it. And then she said, suppose there wasn't any death. How would that be? And one little boy said, well, then there'd be more and more and more trees, and there'd be no room for us. We live in a universe that's recycling itself, the ultimate recycling of birth and death and form and then rebirth. And then for us as human beings, the question is not why or how. The Buddha didn't actually answer those questions. He said those are questions that don't tend to understanding. He said, what I'm interested in is how to navigate the universe as it is in a way that brings love, well-being, freedom to all who want to awaken to this. So I want to read a poem, Ocean. It's called Everyday Grace by Stella Nisanovich. And she writes, it can happen like that, meeting at the auto repair, buying tires amidst the smell of rubber, the grating sound of jackhammers and drills. Anywhere we share stories, grace flows between us. The tire center waiting room becomes a healing place as one speaks of her husband's valve replacement, bed sores from complications. A man speaks of multiple surgeries, notes his false appearance as strong and healthy. I share my sister's death from breast cancer, her youngest only 7. A woman rises, gives her name, Mrs. Henry, then takes my hand, and suddenly an ordinary day becomes holy ground.
Mm.
And what we make of this poem in some way is to understand that life also touches the heart, opens even in the midst of suffering. And it does so when we come together, when our eyes are open and our hearts are open, when our hands underneath it all. That's part of this human journey of being able to navigate this universe of duality. And with all the things that are happening, as you named, the global things of climate change and continuing warfare and racism and conflict and all those other things, and then of course the elections. The point isn't just to find solace. Okay, let's come together and hold hands and say it. Let's make it better. To soothe, but actually to invite a more courageous and remarkable sense of self, which is really who we are underneath it, to be present for this magnificent world with an open heart and a caring spirit.
Mm. I often reflect that in the presence of pain, our hearts either expand or contract. Like they either include the pain and make peace with it in some way, or they shy away from it. And all too often in the world we pull away from pain, and I think that creates its own kind of suffering. Um, it seems to me that the witness is a place that somehow just is with whatever is, without value judgment, without blame, without shame, without tightness. And I'm curious, like, what do you see as the witness, which is such a critical part of meditation, or the
So
observer?
I want to go to that, but I'm going to stay with the first part of what you just said.
Yeah.
We are creatures of expansion and contraction all the time. Our heart pumps, our breath opens and closes. The world is one of expansion and contraction. The tides from the moon change, Wall Street changes, and so forth. So I want to say the notion that we contract against pain or we can open to it, even that is fluid. And it's
Mm,
really important in meditation and spiritual practice not to use it to set up an ideal or not to use it, which people can mistakenly use it to judge themselves. Oh, I shut down. Sometimes you need to shut down and then you open again. So there's something bigger than that, which is the capacity to be with these changes, with the calm oceans and with the storms. As Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh said, when the crowded Vietnamese refugee boats met with storms or pirates, if everyone panicked, all would be lost. But if even one person on the boat remained calm and centered, it was enough.
mm,
It showed everyone the way to survive. So we're all those people. So from moments and times, we panic, we don't know, we're afraid. All the feelings that come up, especially with huge change and storms, And you will all have storms. I mean, that's part of our shared life, along with beautiful seas. But knowing this, it's also possible there's another dimension of who you are that knows that it's possible to get bigger than, to be more spacious than the events of the moment or the day or even the year or the political cycle. Because everything is in this expansion and contraction, including politics, which swings from conservative to liberal and from this and that. There's something so much bigger. And when we take our seat in meditation or bring that quality that you're inviting of witnessing, the first dimension is presence. Can we actually be present for whatever we're experiencing, including the despair or the fear? And then can we have some perspective that this isn't the first time humanity has faced difficulty? We have thousands of generations of ancestors who survived, and we will too, each in, our contribution to that. And then to practice, to find a way actually to be with it. So you ask about the witness or witnessing. Let me see if I can explain or touch it in the simplest way. If you go outside and you put your hand on the trunk of a tree that you are drawn to, and really let yourself feel connected with it, because this is one of the magic things of consciousness, is that not only do we have our own experience, but we can read a novel and go into the life of another person, or watch a movie, or just be there and resonate with one another or the environment. If you put a violin on a table and another in your arms and play certain notes, the violin on the table will resonate with the note strings that you play. We're that profoundly connected. So you put your hand on the tree. It's a beautiful meditation. And you feel, this tree goes through spring and buds and sap rising. It goes through summer and autumn and losing its leaves in winter, and it does it again. And the tree teaches you, it says, yes, find your roots, feel yourself as part of the earth, and trust that you can go through the seasons. So this is both presence and perspective. So here's a way to practice. Let's do a little practice together to try to answer your question about witnessing or having perspective. So those of you who are listening here, if you would be kind enough and experiment, let your eyes close gently. Maybe we'll do 3 or 4 or 5 minutes of the meditation. And once you close your eyes, take a couple of long breaths. And let things settle. Let the eyes and face be soft. Loosen the jaw. Allow the shoulders to relax and the arms and hands rest easily. And feel the weight of your body sink down onto your seat. And as you do, feel that you are completely supported by the earth, as if you have roots like that tree right where you are. Now notice how your body is breathing itself. You don't have to do it. It breathes. And in fact, the earth is breathing you. With each breath, You breathe with the trees and the otters, the earthworms and the algae. We're all exchanging our breaths. And feel the beautiful exchange of your body breathing, opening and closing. And as if with a bow, express a gratitude. Thank you. Thank you, breath. Thank you to your body and breath for keeping me alive. You don't have to fix it or change it. You just bow in gratitude. And notice too, the whole field of the energy, the vibrations of your body, the sensations that make up body, pleasant and painful, all kinds of sensations, cool and warm, hard and soft. And notice especially the areas that your body carries stress, the difficulties held in your body, in the jaw or the shoulders and back or the gut. And with loving awareness, simply notice all that your body carries. And as if to bow again, say thank you. Thank you for carrying so much. You can relax. I'm okay just now, just here and now. You can relax and rest. And notice what happens when you say thank you. You can relax. And with the same mindful, loving awareness, notice what the heart and mind is carrying. The emotions of grief and longing and love and fear, agitation and calm. They come like waves of the ocean. So many different feelings carried by the heart and mind. Notice which ones are present just now. And notice with the feelings, there are also stories and thoughts and images, plans and memories and endless ideas and figuring things out, analyzing the busy mind, and feel its energy. And say thank you. Thank you for trying to protect me and take care of me, which is what the mind is doing. Thank you to the heart for carrying all these emotions. I'm okay just now. You can relax. You can rest. And let the mind quiet a bit. Thank you for trying to protect me. Let the mind quiet. Let the heart be at ease. Thank you for holding so much. I'm okay. Just here and now. And now notice something really important and beautiful. You can be aware of the breath and body as it changes. You can be aware of the feelings, the emotions, and the thoughts. But these are not who you are. They're constantly changing. Who you are is the consciousness, the awareness, the loving awareness that notices this body and breath, that notices the feelings of all kinds, that notices the thoughts, and relax into the spaciousness of awareness. You are consciousness itself, open, present, aware of what is happening, peaceful, allowing for the rise and fall of experience. Yet who you are is the vast consciousness, the awareness itself, witnessing, spacious. And with this peaceful, spacious attention, you can respond to the world, to the body and the senses and the feelings. The Buddhist texts begin, "O nobly born, remember your true nature. Remember the spacious dignity of presence and rest in it." It's who you really are. So let your eyes open gently. And Ocean, did you experience the difference between the body, the emotions, the thoughts, and the knowing of them, the consciousness? Was that pretty?
Yes, I did. And I don't know if everyone has this sensation, but there's some feeling of like, I've changed. I'm 51 years old. Things about me are very different than they were when I was little, but there's some essential self that feels like eternal, I would have to say at this point, because it's always been there and I believe always will. And a key part of that for me is the witness that is not in the activities of life, but watches them like a compass that knows what north is, regardless of what direction you spin or where you go. And that place to me is quite precious because life has all kinds of turbulence and roller coasters and heartbreak and hopes and beauty, and the place that just is, which I feel you like calling us into, inviting us to notice and attune to right now. Like that's my peace place.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, yeah,
So, a couple of things to say. First, people often think that mindfulness is some kind of activity that will help you make things better and get rid of the stress and see things
yeah,
clearly, and all that's true. When I added the phrase "thank you," like a little bow to your breath or body or emotions, it sets the right relationship, because instead of feeling like I have to get rid of the stress in my body, or I have to stop my mind from thinking about this so much, you can say thank you, and things
mm,
start to soften. not because you're trying to judge it or change it, but because you're making space and appreciating. And
Yeah.
then this brings you back to the place of understanding. Now, the question that will arise for all of us in this is, yeah, but how do we engage this troubled world from this place?
Mm-hmm.
After becoming president, writes Nelson, I asked one of my bodyguards, two of them, to go for a walk in town. Let's have lunch. So we went to one of the central restaurants. And after a bit of waiting, the waiter came and took our orders. And I realized that at the table right in front of us, there was a single man also being served. When he was served, I told one of my guards to go ask that man to join us. He went and transmitted the request, and the man stood up, brought his plate, and sat next to me. While eating, his hands were constantly shaking, and he didn't lift his head from his food. When we finished, he waved at me without even looking. I shook his hand, and he walked away. One of the guards said to me, Madiba, that man must be very sick, as his hands wouldn't stop trembling and shaking while he was eating. Not at all. The reason for his tremor is another, I replied. They looked at me and I said, that man was the guardian of the jail I was locked in for 27 years. Often, after the torture I was subjected to, I screamed and cried for water, and he came to humiliate me. He laughed at me. Instead of giving me water, he urinated on my head. He wasn't sick. He was scared and shook, maybe fearing that I, now president of South Africa, would send him to jail and do the same thing he did with me, torturing and humiliating him. But that is not me. That behavior is not a part of my character, nor of my ethics. Minds that seek revenge destroy human beings and whole nations, while those that seek reconciliation bring beauty on this earth. So it's a remarkable passage. And I read it because it speaks to the question of, if we quiet the mind and step back with some perspective rather than being engaged in every emotion, how there's grief and fear, and now there's hope, and now there's what, and all the thoughts, well, what if, and this and that. They're trying to help you, and they need to be honored and felt.
Mm-hmm.
But who we are more fundamentally is bigger than that. And from that place, not only can we see and hold the fear and grief in a compassionate heart, but also we have the space to act in an entirely different way, to not get caught up in the reactions and the anger and all the kinds of scenarios that we are afraid of. And instead, the nobility of heart, which is who you are, the dignity, the original dignity which Nelson Mandela carried, that can shine. And you act from that.
Thank you. That I'm kind of speechless, which is a rare experience for me, but that reading you just that quote you just shared from Nelson Mandela was so profound. And we're seeing a lot of people sharing as well. Lori, responding to the meditation, said, when I thanked my breath, my body, my mind, my heart, I had an upwelling of emotion and tears running down my face, but without sorrow.
Beautiful.
And then Shanna, regarding what you just read, said he chose to detach and witness his life. What a blessing. Um, I am curious, for those of us who identify as activists, who want to create as much positive change as we can in this world, who see the levels of suffering and violence and pain in the world and want to do something about it. Um, how do we engage? How do we participate? How do we play our part fully without losing our essence? Like, how do you engage in the world as maybe the old saying goes, without becoming of it?
Yeah. Well, it says in the Bhagavad Gita, the essence is to act beautifully without attachment to the fruits of the actions. And what it means is you don't get to determine how it turns out, but you do get to plant your seeds of goodness. And as Thoreau said, convince me you have a seed there, and I'm prepared to expect miracles. You get to plant the seeds, and eventually, in their own time, they bear fruit. That's not your job. Your job is to make a beautiful garden, to plant beautiful things, to tend them. Now, here's the thing with activists, because as someone who's been an activist myself at times, I've also taught retreats and had many burned out activists come and join us. Because if you work from that place of, I've got to save the world, it's an emergency, let me do everything I can, you take the suffering outside into your own body. And it's very hard to sustain. Trudy and I, my beloved and my wife and colleague in teaching, have been going to the Oslo Freedom Forum in Norway, which is a place where the Nobel Prize is granted every year. And the Oslo Freedom Forum doesn't bring just one great person to celebrate, but during the year, it brings 40 people, each of whom would be worthy of a Nobel Prize, to tell their stories, to educate the 1,000 people who come, to support each other. And one of the things that we do, especially working with the younger activists, is to teach them practices so that they don't take the suffering outside into themselves. And an example, I think, of this extraordinary activist in Latin America who was working to save the rainforests and done amazing things and brought together 1 million students in one country to, protest and stand up for the trees and the animals and so forth. But what started to happen for her is that every time there were huge fires burning down parts of the Amazon, every time she heard about it, her menstrual period would start the next day because she was carrying the fire in herself.
Hmm.
And so she needed practices, and there were a series of them. One practice was, because she was working with fire, was a water practice to sweep through her body and wash out all that was burning and send it back to the earth, to become like a tree herself, and to feel the deep roots and how the earth could nourish her, to become spacious in time and feel biologic and geographic time, to give a perspective that forests renew and the earth renews herself, and to feel that rather than carrying in her body, and let her body rest at peace while all the rest was happening. There was a series of practices to do a compassion practice. When that was the outer, or that was within her body, I also asked her to make an altar. I said, I don't know who or what you believe in or what brings you inspiration. It can be Pachamama. It can be the great shamans of the jungle. It can be Mahatma Gandhi, or it can be Lehman Gabowi, who is the president of Liberia, who said, Liberia used to be known for its child soldiers, and now it's known for its women leaders. She won the Nobel Prize. Or Wangari Maathai, who planted trees in Nigeria, got imprisoned like all these people. And her movement planted 51 million trees by the time she got her Nobel Prize. I said, feel them and put their images up, because you're not supposed to do this alone. You have backup. You have 1,000 generations of stewards of the forest, of people who stood up. And if you take it all in yourself, that's hubris. That's ego in a way, even if it feels like it's good ego. And instead, feel yourself in the line of those who serve, but become what you want the world to be. Let the mind quiet and the heart open. And then feel what is the most effective response, where you and the peace and the change you want are the same.
Mm.
One more thing to add. A good friend and colleague of mine who died last year, Wes Nisker, went to visit Gary Snyder. Gary is one of our great environmentalists. He wrote Earth Household and got the Pulitzer Prize for his environmental and writing work 50 years ago. And said, Gary, you're in your 90s. What do you have to say to us? The oceans are rising, the species are getting lost, the deserts are getting fiercer, refugees are moving, the atmosphere is changing. And he looked back and he said, don't feel guilty. If you want to change it, if you want to save it, don't do it out of guilt. Don't do it out of fear. Don't do it out of anger. Those are the very forces that have made these human cause problems. Our anger and our fear and our greed, our guilt. So simply, he said, if you want to save it because you love it.
Hmm.
It's the only force that's big enough for humans to really make a difference. It's like the force that lets mothers lift cars off their children. And so you quiet the mind, you make your altar, you say, I'm in line, thank you, to whoever is on there, Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Sojourner Truth, and you say, help me do this with a peaceful heart. Help me do this out of the courage of love. When Martin Luther King stood up, you could feel that. And that becomes the invitation to your nobility, that you're present, you're not afraid of what's happening, and you're not afraid of your emotions. There's fear and grief and all that, you honor them. If I were to go to talk to the Dalai Lama now about this election, and I have the privilege of speaking to him on occasion over the years, what should we do with all this? I think the first thing he would do would be to weep a little. His eyes would fill with tears because he's so compassionate. And he said, yes, there might be more suffering. It's just the truth of it. And then he would smile as well. He might even laugh, as he does, as he and Tutu did in that book on joy. And he would say, yes, there's suffering. Me too. So much suffering. So then you'd feel him really with you. And then he would smile and he'd say, yes, but also must have joy. We must have joy. And so both of those are true, or you can get caught in taking the fires inside and the loss inside.
I'm remembering a passage from the prophet about how the deeper sorrow is carved into the canyon of your heart, the more love it can contain. And I'm reflecting on how, in some ways, the binary mind can think as if joy and happiness and all good emotions are over here, and pain and fear and suffering, or all bad emotions are over here, and we're trying to get to more joy and less pain. And yet, there is some way in which the totality of everything is part of living fully and loving fully. And we cannot open our hearts fully to creation without also opening our hearts fully to destruction and to death, because it's all part of it. So I'm just breathing into that, and with such gratitude, Jack, for your lifetime of inviting us to discover our capacity to witness and be with what is. And it strikes me also that part of what is our desire to change what is, our capacity to
Yes.
act and to take action, that is real, that is part of truth. And for those of us who feel a place inside that says, no, I want to do something to make this world better, I don't want to just breathe and accept the status quo. Well, here's the thing, like the capacity to act, the capacity to engage, the capacity to love and contribute and put love into action is also part of what is so, and part of what we get to embrace when we're present. Um, my dad used to quote as I was growing up Nietzsche saying, or paraphrase Nietzsche saying, "She who will, the fates lead; she who won't, they drag." And it sometimes seems as if we have a calling or a purpose or a direction, and we're going to end up there one way or the other, but we either make it more painful or less painful, partly depending on our willingness. What is your sense of how to attune to, if we have a sense of purpose or calling in our lives, what is that, and what's the difference between that and the expectations, the assumptions that we may have inherited or picked up that aren't really attuned to our essence?
Well, whether it's an activism, and we do need to act, and we act all the time, but we can act with a bigger vision and with greater import when we're really connected with our heart and with what Gary Snyder says, with what we love. Save it because you love it. But neither meditation nor activism has to be a grim duty. Okay, I work out at the gym and I have a good diet and I, go to therapy and now I better meditate and fix myself. It's not that. It's really an invitation to open the heart and be present for everything that you said, Ocean, for the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows. And in activism, you stand up because you care, because you love, and then you bring your best to it. Molly Ivins, a great activist and author and so forth in Texas, she said, keep on fighting for freedom and justice, beloveds, but don't forget to have fun doing it. How is that? And I tell you a couple of stories. I want you to read you a tough poem and then tell a story. And this is one of the most brilliant poems of the last decade or two by Jack Gilbert, who died a couple of years ago. And it's tough. It's called A Brief for the Defense. Sorrow everywhere, slaughter everywhere. If babies are not starving someplace, they're starving somewhere else with flies in their nostrils. But we enjoy our lives because that's also what the gods want. Otherwise, the mornings before lavender summer dawn would not be made so fine, and the Bengal tiger would not be fashioned orange and black so miraculously well. The poor women at the fountain are laughing together between the suffering they've known and the awfulness in their future, even while somebody in the village is very sick. If we deny our happiness, resist our satisfaction, we lessen the importance of their deprivation. We must risk delight. We can do without pleasure seeking, but not delight, not enjoyment. We must have the stubbornness to accept our gladness in the ruthless furnace of this world, to make injustice the only measure of our attention is to praise the devil. To make injustice the only measure of our attention is to praise the devil. If the locomotive of the Lord runs us down, we should give thanks that the end had magnitude. We must admit there will be music despite everything. And those are powerful lines. If we deny our happiness, we lessen the importance of their deprivation. And when you go into refugee camps, they don't want you to come in depressed and
Mm,
overwhelmed and frightened. It does not help.
mm,
So some years ago, my daughter and a group of young lawyers, she started Oasis Legal Services, which is a wonderful nonprofit that works to save the lives of refugees from around the world, in particular LGBTQ who've been tortured or imprisoned or all kinds of things. And at the beginning of the first Donald Trump presidency, you may recall there were those executive actions to prevent people from 7 Muslim majority countries coming into the US and shut our doors and all that. And so there are all these people actually sort of half imprisoned in limbo in our airports. And she and a bunch of other hotshot lawyers from Berkeley that she works with went down to the airport. I went with them. And there were 1,000 people demonstrating or more. After all, it's the Bay Area, right? We have to be welcoming people. And they were by the gates. There were several gates of international gates where people could come in. And they were doing what the activists usually do. They had their signs, you know, no ban, no fear, refugees welcome here, and, chanting and doing the things, right? In big crowds. And so we were at one gate, there were like 400 people chanting, no ban, no fear, their signs. And it was kind of aggressive, as activists like to be. And on the side, there was a New Orleans jazz band that had come down. And as people were chanting, no ban, no fear, refugees are welcome here, the drummer picked up the beat a little and put a little, drum beat behind it. And then the trumpet player put a little riff on top. And then we were chanting, and then the sax player came in and played a melody along with it. And pretty soon the band moved toward the center, and everyone was chanting, no ban, no fear, refugees are welcome here. But it turned into music, and everyone was dancing, no ban, no fear, refugees, welcome here. It changed the entire feeling of it.
mm,
Even the guards, the immigration, they were all smiling. We were there at the gate. We were not going to go away. We were going to stay there till these people were taken care of. But we were singing and dancing. And it was beautiful.
mm,
And
mm,
it speaks to your question. Yes, we stand up for justice. But who are we when we stand up? And how beautiful can we be? Can we be like Nelson Mandela showed us?
mm.
Can we be that spirit?
Mm. Shani said that may be the most beautiful activism story I've ever heard. Um, we heard from Dawn, who said, "This is the most exquisite yet tangible help I have received of late. I know I will take this into my personal practice and into my life. The duality of suffering and joy. Mandela, Dalai Lama, Desmond Tutu, Khalil Gibran, so many teachers and so much wisdom. Thank you, Ocean and Jack, and all who are open to engaging in the most elegant ways with gratitude for it all." Many other people are also writing in, and just to respond to a few of the questions that have been shared. Actually, Brigitte said, not a question, just want to say what an honor it is to be in your presence, Jack. Thank you for arranging this experience, Ocean. Brigitte, thank you for being here with us.
So here's Howard Zinn, the people's history of the United States. To be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It is based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history, especially in difficult times, will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, if we imagine only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something. If we remember those times and places, and there are so many where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act and the possibility of sending the spinning top of a world in a benevolent direction.
Mm.
So we're putting together the energy of love and the capacity to act.
Mm. It's so powerful. Helen, and I feel like you're answering her question already. She said, I find it really hard to feel and embrace joy when I know how many children, animals, and people are suffering and hurting. How can we reconcile this within our consciousness? And I think you're touching on that, but is there anything more you would say?
Well, first, I really want to take Helen's question seriously. And like that image I said of talking with the Dalai Lama, my eyes could fill with tears. There are so many hungry children, and it's crazy because we have grain elevators full of food in some countries and starving children elsewhere, you know. And how can we not care? We human beings, the equation is the more greed, the more hatred, the more ignorance, the more suffering. This is the noble truths of the Buddha, that if there's greed and hatred and ignorance, the more there is of it, the more humans will suffer. But it has an opposite. The opposite of greed is generosity. You know, the opposite of hatred is love. The opposite of ignorance is wisdom. And these are qualities that are born in you also, that you have, that is your noble birthright. So when Helen speaks, I too want to weep. It's also not new. If we go back 100 years or 500 or 1,000 years, we'll still see people being mistreated and enslaved and hungry children and so many other things. Holding it all in the great heart of compassion so that we don't turn away. We don't have fear of the fear to look. I was sitting with Jerry Brown right at the time when he was ending his term, his last term as governor. And I said, Jerry, what are you going to focus on? What are you going to do? He said, I'm going to go to my ranch in the Sierras, and tend the land. But there are two things I care about. One is climate change, and one is nuclear proliferation. And what I understood, we talked about nuclear proliferation. There are still 14,000 nuclear bombs and warheads scattered around the world. Each one could be enormously destructive. Is if we don't look, if we don't acknowledge it, like Helen is saying, if we don't acknowledge the children who are hungry, if we don't acknowledge not just Ukraine or Gaza, but Sudan and the Congo and Myanmar and the Rohingyas, if we turn our gaze away in denial, we can't make a difference. Our heart has to be big enough and our dignity is strong enough that we can turn and say, yes, we're willing to see that nuclear weapons are still here. And then some of us are called to do that work, to support the treaties and the disarming in ways that we can. Some of us are called to the work of the children. Some of us are called to the environment, to the rainforests. We each have a way to reach out our hand and mend some part of the fabric of life that we're woven into. And it's not your job to do it all. And it's not your job to fix it all or to think that it should go away on your watch, because it won't. Nor to be overwhelmed, but to say, I am here and I stand up with courage and love and compassion. and I will add my part. I will add my voice and my love and my energy to this. And this is what you can do.
Mm.
If you let the grief overwhelm you, you have to hold it with something bigger. This is humanity. This is the struggle of the ages. So you hold it, but you hold it from a bigger place.
Hmm. There is a perspective from which the the forces of life are not just what we see on the outside, but also what happens on the inside, and from which perhaps part of the purpose of life is to bring more love into our lives and into our world. If we hold that perspective, then how we think and how we feel matters, not instead of what we do, but as well as what we do. And what we do can be imbued with that meaning and that purpose. And I think that makes the outer battles a little differently framed because it's an expression of who we are. But what happens out here, death, life, birth, creation, destruction, war, peace, it matters. It matters a lot. And yet nothing can take away the joy, the heart, the love that emanates like a fountain from the inside out. Jack, we're nearing the end of our time here today. Um, as we move towards closing, I just want to ask, are there any final words you want to share with us?
I want to get quiet for a moment because what you just said was also so beautiful and moving. William Blake. William Blake said, if one is to do good, it must be done in the minute particulars. General good is the plea of the hypocrite, the flatterer, and the scoundrel. So we have all these ideas and things of what should be. But what you said, Ocean, about being it, becoming it in some way, in this way, the inner and the outer are not separate. They're this life that we live. I'm going to read a little short story as a way to end. And it's kind of a very intimate or personal story from a man, because how we live, how we touch the world is governed by this. It's 8:30 in the morning, busy in the clinic when an elderly gentleman in his 80s arrived to have stitches removed from his hand. He says he's in a hurry. He has an appointment coming up soon at 9. I take his vital signs and sit down knowing it could be a long time till he's seen. And he says, please, I've got another appointment. Can you do this? So I say, come with me. And I say, as I'm taking out the stitches, is it another doctor's appointment? And he says, no, he needs to go to the nursing home to eat breakfast with his wife. I inquire as to her health. He told me she'd been there for a while. She was the victim of Alzheimer's disease. And as we talked, I asked if she would be upset if he was late. He replied she no longer knew who he was, that she'd not recognized him for 5 years now. I was surprised and asked him, and you still go every morning, even though she doesn't know who you are? He patted my hand and smiled and said, she doesn't know me, but I still know who she is. How we touch this world, how we see it, how we see everybody. I do a loving kindness practice, and I love to see the child inside everyone. The people I might say are bad actors, and I see them, their original innocence when they were in kindergarten at 5 years old with that shining eyes, and I say, that also is in there. And so to see that allows us somehow to enter the difficulty of the world and say, yes, I will see with the eyes of love anyway and not forget.
I will see you with the eyes of love anyway and not forget. So beautiful. And folks, I just want to say my closing piece is this. They say put your own oxygen mask on first before helping others when you're on an airplane. I don't think it's quite so linear. I think we take care of ourselves and we take care of others and we witness and we act, and it's all part of life. But some of us have a tendency to give to everyone else first, to think about the world and the world's problems and the world's suffering without caring for ourselves. So nurture the nurturer, love the servant, love yourself, not for what you do, but for who you are. And of course, I wouldn't be representing Food Revolution Network if I didn't also say every bite you take is a chance to practice self-love, self-care, and right relation with the world around you. So bless you all. Thank you so much for being with us in this beautiful, beautiful exchange and sharing. Jack, thank you.
Thank you, Ocean. It's a pleasure.
It is a pleasure. Lots of hearts going up on the screen here. Thank you all so much. Bless you. And for those who are asking, yes, we have recorded and we will send out a link for the replay.
And if they want anything, if they
Yes.
want anything from me, they can just go to jackkornfield.com, and there's all kinds of free guided meditations and practices and so forth. So.
jackkornfield.com, and of course lots of books, so many wonderful resources
And beautiful
utilizing the
trainings. If
lovely.
anyone wants to know how to teach this to others, there's beautiful trainings too. So thank you.
Wonderful.
All right.
Blessings.
Take care.
Thank you, Jack. Goodbye.